The situation in the Middle East is extremely dangerous. More and more people are wondering what will happen if the war between Israel and Iran continues to escalate. Is the first use of nuclear weapons since World War II imminent? Publicist Heiko Schöning says no, we don't need to be afraid. But why is he so sure? I would like to discuss that with him now. Welcome, Mr. Schöning. Mr. Schöning, to put it bluntly, are we on the brink of nuclear annihilation, or is the fear of a nuclear catastrophe exaggerated?
I don't believe we are on the brink of a major catastrophe because my main message today is don't fear the end of the world. What we are seeing is a camouflage and deception operation, not atomic bombs. What we are seeing is a war between two criminal organizations. As to the bigger picture, one side favors war with Iran and peace with Russia. This is represented by their straw man Donald Trump. The other side wants exactly the opposite, a war with Russia and peace with Iran. Their straw men are Joe Biden and Barack Obama. And today's war of aggression against Iran, yes, it primarily killed leading figures of the enemy clan. By the way, the fairy tale of weapons of mass destruction and atomic bombs is as old and as false as Hiroshima. And the purpose is solely to frighten the population so that they give up more of their freedoms.
You say there are two camps, one for war and one for peace, and you assign Donald Trump to the peace camp. Yet just yesterday, Trump declared that he had no desire to negotiate with Iran. Why are you still convinced that he doesn't want war?
Well, Trump doesn't want war with Russia and Ukraine. That's relatively clear and is now further backed up by the withdrawal of air defense missile systems from Ukraine. The order came from his Secretary of Defense. These are evidently very hard facts, and sooner or later Trump and Putin will come to an agreement. That was clear from the beginning. I also said at the time it wouldn't happen in 24 hours, as Donald Trump claimed, just one phone call and it's over in 24 hours. That's not how it works. But ultimately, the Trump clan is concerned and busy with war over Iran. We are seeing that right now with the war of aggression, which of course includes the US. That's the current situation.
You mentioned Hiroshima, and Nagasaki should also be mentioned. Hundreds of thousands died in these attacks. And yet you say we don't need to be afraid of that. Why?
That's right, these people died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in a cruel way. Children and old people, women, men. That actually happened. So the victims are there and for real. And this is the really important message. A globally important message. It wasn't nuclear bombs that caused this, since there is sufficient evidence by now that it was napalm and mustard gas. There is a book on this subject entitled Hiroshima Revisited by the author Dr. Michael Palmer. I am stating this here for the first time so clearly and so publicly because fortunately copies of this book have already been distributed to the public. And it is also courageously available in the Auf 1 television shop. And again, the important thing is to understand that no atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, many people there died as a result of a bombing raid with napalm and mustard gas. And that also coincides with my own research because the person behind all this was actually John McCloy and his family. John McCloy was the Deputy Secretary of War of the United States during World War II. He is also related by marriage to Konrad Adenauer. And John J. McCloy's father-in-law, Herr Zinser, was the world's largest mustard gas producer in the United States at the time. And you really have to understand that because it means that the common narrative is simply false. And yes, everyone played along. So when you realize that, you think, wait a minute, what is this all about? Why have we been lied to for so long? It's like a material substitute for biblical hell with atomic bombs. And we are seeing exactly the same game plan played out now, with this sudden war of aggression against Iran and its atomic bomb fairy tale. Even Pakistan is getting involved at this juncture.
I have to follow up on that. Do you mean that there were no real atomic bombs in 1945? Or do you go so far as to say that they don't even exist today?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that for clarification. Well, I have to say, I don't really know. Nonetheless, I assume that atomic bombs may exist now. But the point is, and this is also documented in Dr. Michael Palmer's book, that no atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This means that a fear scenario had been built up from it for almost 100 years now. So to what extent is all this really true? Who had which atomic bombs and for what purposes at the time? You really have to ask yourself what was going on there and then, and what was being played out there. Especially when it comes to Pakistan, which supposedly had atomic bombs for a long time. You really have to ask yourself, wait a minute, how far have they always been in their own research and development? How politically stable are they? Why has this never been a problem? Questions for the West. And that's why I can only give a relatively all clear. We are not looking at an end of the world scenario. However, there is a real conflict between two criminal organizations. You could even call them mafia clans.
Let's get back to Iran. Israel justifies its attack with the alleged threat of an Iranian nuclear bomb. At the same time, Pakistan has long had nuclear weapons and is a Muslim country. So why this massive pressure on Iran, but not on Pakistan?
That's probably not necessarily the reason. You have to go back much further, and I can only say that one doesn't know much about world history during the last 100 years if one does not factor in the crimes and life of John McCloy and his family. He was close friends with Konrad Adenauer, and the largest mustard gas producer was his father-in-law Zinser. Konrad Adenauer also married a woman named Zinser, and that's how far that goes. And it must also be said quite clearly about today's war of aggression. Why should it suddenly be such a big problem now, 46 years after the Iranian Revolution, that Iran is allegedly building nuclear weapons, even if it had them all along? That just doesn't really fit the picture. So what we are actually seeing there militarily, what actually took place there? A war of aggression has been waged to wipe out the leadership of Iran. High-ranking figures of this clan have been wiped out there, and Donald Trump's statement really sounds Mafia style, responding to a threat there. I can only say, to put it simply, that these are two Mafia clans fighting each other.
And Israel itself is also a nuclear power, albeit unofficially. The arsenal was built up with French support, against the will of the US. Why doesn't the so-called rules-based community consistently demand disarmament there as well?
As far as that background is concerned, I have to say that I'm not too familiar with it. I can't say for sure, but I always try to say what I know and also what I don't know. But it is quite clear to everyone that if this were the case, double standards would be applied. One state is not allowed to have it while the other violates all agreements and does not sign up to them. That is completely intransparent, and it just keeps going on like that. I can only say that anyone who is really interested in this issue, or who should be interested in it, in any official capacity, let's say any Bundeswehr officer, for example, they really should read Whitney Webb's books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. She describes in detail the whole story surrounding Jeffrey Epstein and the entire clan that helped build the State of Israel. And there you can see who these people actually are, where do they come from, and how did the whole thing actually come about. Whitney Webb's books are absolutely fascinating in terms of providing the basics about the power structures we have in these states and why they are so closely linked to the leading mafia circles in the US. You can only really understand this fundamentally if you really familiarize yourself with the subject and don't just parrot things.
Let's take a quick look at Ukraine. There too, there have been repeated red lines, such as the attacks on Russian long-range bombers. From Moscow's point of view, this is a reason for a nuclear counterstrike. But so far, nothing has happened. Does that mean the West no longer believes in the existence of Russian nuclear weapons?
That's right. It's a provocation against Russia as a nuclear power. And the West, especially the Federal Republic of Germany, is acting as if Russia didn't have any nuclear weapons at all. And if we weren't on the brink of nuclear war in World War III, as if the Russians couldn't retaliate with nuclear weapons at all, that's very, very strange. And you can really see, as I've simplified it, that these two criminal clans are fighting each other. It's now on a knife's edge. And this is also an opportunity for us citizens to look behind the scenes and see what is really going on. Because this narrative of atomic bombs and nuclear fear, which has always been cultivated, is now really being exploited and, in fact, overplayed. So one can only marvel at this, and in this respect, one simply has to go back to basics and say, wait a minute, how was it really? Particularly in the light of proof positive that the deaths in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were actually caused by mustard gas and napalm, and not by atomic bombs. That means that the Soviet Union and Russia may have been covering up this narrative the whole time. How did that actually happen? Why did it happen? And that's why we really need to understand the basics. And then we can say, no, you can't scare us with the end of the world scenario any longer. The actual balance of power is completely different.
Finally, one more fundamental question. Your thesis is that we are not facing an end-of-the-world situation. Does that also apply to the war in Ukraine?
Yes, indeed, because apart from the fact that there really is this brutal war between these sophisticated criminal organizations and, of course, a lot of collateral damage, as it is cynically called when it comes to us citizens, the fact is that the whole narrative is being exploited further and further to make us, the population, afraid and to scare us into agreeing to give up our freedoms. And that is today's digital prison, built with fears of war and the intimidation with the threat of nuclear weapons. And here comes the good news, since we now have a chance to look behind the curtains and say, wait a minute, this is completely different and they have been lying to us for a long time. Many citizens have now noticed the same with the COVID narrative. These things are intertwined and coordinated worldwide and in essence are part of their strategy. This is a unique opportunity for clarity, realization and comprehensive awareness in this matter.
Mr. Schöning, thank you very much for the interview.